The BYU Cougars are chasing a college football playoff berth, and the last real impediment to that is the Cincinnati Bearcats. How much of an impediment will the Bearcats be? We're digging into it on a crossover edition of Locked On Cougars and Locked On Bearcats.
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On Cougars and Locked On Bearcats. I'm Locked On Cougars host Jake Hatch, executive producer of the KSL Sports Zone in Salt Lake City, Utah. That across from me digitally is Jeff Carr, the man, the myth, the legend of all things Cincinnati, host of Locked On Bearcats, Locked On Reds, and the man of many other hats, it feels like. But thank you for making both of these fine podcasts your first listen today, and thank you for making the Locked On Podcast Network, in fact, America's #1 sports podcast network. Make sure you subscribe, rate and review the shows, and share them with your family and friends. It's the holiday season. It's a good time to let them know about these daily-centric podcasts covering both Cincinnati and BYU. All right, so Jeff Carr, the last time BYU played at Nippert Stadium, in fact, the only time they played at Nippert Stadium, the game was somewhat memorable, but it was more the post game that was the most memorable because then head coach Tommy Tuberville told a Cincinnati Bearcats fan, "Go get a job." Do you remember this said incident?
I remember it well. I remember the response on local radio. It was an absolute firestorm because at that point, a lot of people were already clamoring for him to lose his job. It was clear to most of us that this was like a pseudo retirement plan for him or something. He just didn't seem to be in it. In fact, I remember where we sat at that period of time. We were like the section next to the student section. There was a guy that every game brought a cardboard sign and wrote on it the number of consecutive quarters that the Bearcats went without scoring a touchdown. It was a fantastic time at Nippert Stadium.
So life's gotten a lot better for Cincinnati since then. Obviously, the Luke Fickell era, and obviously Scott Satterfield's had a really resurgent year this year. So from the BYU perspective, I said in the open, this is kind of the last real impediment to BYU's chances of going to the Big 12 title game, playing in the college football playoff, etc. Give me a sense of, I guess, the community feeling around this game as BYU makes the trek to Nippert.
I really feel like Bearcats fans are still trying to pick up the pieces from what this season is, because at the beginning of the year, we were like, you know what, just make a bowl. Just be good. Just have a winning record. That's fine. And then almost out of the gate, they clinched a bowl spot. And we're like, oh, okay, maybe this team's really, really good. But I think that we have just settled in on this team is good. This team is not great. This team is not elite. There's definitely some holes in its game plan that you can take advantage of. And Utah and Arizona, these last 2 games, last 3 weeks, last 2 games for the Bearcats have really taken advantage of that. And that has put pressure on Brendan Sorsby and play man coverage a lot more than you play zone, because Brendan Sorsby is just able to carve up zone coverage, but it's the man coverage that you're able to disguise and bring the pressure with that really throws him off. And when the Bearcats don't pass, they don't win.
Okay, so the other question I've got, and then on that front is, it sounds like Evan Pryor may be back for this game. You mentioned the fact if they don't throw, they don't win. How much can a guy like that coming back to the lineup bolster this Bearcats team?
Huge. It's Thunder and Lightning. Thunder is Tawee Walker and Lightning is Evan Pryor. They've tried to fill in with Manny Covey and Zion Johnson and Chance Williams, also trying to get some carries in there in Evan Pryor's absence, but that's a big deal. And he's also a dangerous guy in the passing game as well. And then also coming back this week will be Caleb Goody, who is a deep threat, the best deep threat on the Bearcats roster. He was not in the Arizona game, and there were a couple of deep passes that kind of felt like you missed that guy because he just wasn't able to reel in. Or there were a couple of guys that had chances, but they weren't able to reel in the passes like Caleb Goody has all year long. So getting those 2 guys back on offense will really help things out. But it's definitely going to be like, can they get the tight end Joe Royer involved? I also saw this statistic in their 3 losses this year. UC, Joe Royer has 1 catch in each of them. 1 catch against Nebraska, 1 catch against Utah, and 1 catch against Arizona. So if you limit their NFL tight end, then you can really put a lot of pressure on the rest of the offense to get it done.
Okay, so and the other thing I was looking at this, and it was kind of crazy to me, but the more I think about it, it makes sense because The offense for Cincinnati, when it's been at its best, it just scores lightning quick. It feels like it's maybe 3-4 play drive, explosive plays and the like. But they have one of the lowest, if not the lowest, time of possession across the Power Four. Is that a concern at all? Because from my vantage point, BYU, they are all about controlling time of possession, pace of game, running it down your throat. And if you give them 35 plus minutes of TOP, they'll happily take it.
I think there's a little bit of it where the offense feels like it needs to make up for the defense, because the Bearcats defense is happy to allow you to hold on to the ball. This is going to be an interesting game from that aspect as well, because the Bearcats defense allows teams to move not necessarily freely, but what feels like freely between the 20s. It's once you get into the red zone, they're able to buckle down a little bit better. They've got a pretty decent stoppage rate when it comes to keeping teams out of the end zone, albeit field goals are still very much coming in droves against this Bearcats defense. They are not the let's shut you out, let's beat you, 10-0 type team, but they're content to beat you 30-28 if that's what it comes to. So part of that is the offense feels like it's got to make up for that. But you're right. Like, methodical is anything but what this Bearcats offense is. When they were going against Arizona in the first quarter, it was home run after home run. Tawee Walker just absolutely breaking open for long gains. And then on the passing side of things, that's what they're going to look at too, because even when they had a low-scoring game against UCF, one of their key plays was Jeff Caldwell getting behind the coverage and Brendan Sorsby throwing it over the top to him. So there's definitely going to be those home run moments that if you're BYU's defense, you're going to have to keep in check, because if you force them to play behind the sticks, you can really slow down this Bearcats offense that has put a lot of points on the board throughout this season.
Okay, so on that front, you mentioned the fact that Cincinnati is happy to let teams kind of motor between the 20s. I'm telling you, BYU fans are like, hey, that sounds like us, because that's kind of what the Jay Hill defense has been doing all year. There's been a lot of consternation from Cougar fans that, you see these teams, they may break a play or two, but it literally is between the 20s, maybe an explosive. But once you get inside, I call it scoring territory, 30 yards and in, Jay Hill, like, that defense buckles down. So that may be a key to this game, that the more I think about it, whoever can limit those scoring opportunities, especially trading touchdowns for field goals, may be a key to who comes out on top in this game. Now, stakes on this game are very, very high, and we'll get to that momentarily, because I've got a question for you, Jeff, in terms of just the overall what we should expect environment-wise from Nippert. I'm sure that you've got your questions about what BYU's bringing to town as well. We'll get into all that as we continue on this crossover edition of Locked On Cougars and Locked On Bearcats. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than with our friends over at FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand that you're watching of said game, FanDuel has live bets on everything who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks and quite literally anything else in between. Plus, you can even combine those live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout, and that keeps every game more exciting, especially when your team is making that late push. So whether you're rooting for the Utah Jazz, or really if you have any other interest in sports, FanDuel's got the options for you guys. And right now, they are giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Head to FanDuel.com to sign up today and play your game with FanDuel, as they are the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Thank you once again for making Locked On Bearcats and Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. I'm Locked On Cougars host Jake Hatch. That's Jeff Carr, host of Locked On Bearcats. And want to remind everybody, thank you for making the Locked On Podcast Network America's #1 sports podcast network. We're both very proud to be part of this. I know, Jeff, you do a lot of work in the MLB sphere as well with the network. So it's cool to see what this has become in terms of what Locked On is building. And the question I've got for you is, BYU has a really well-traveled fan base that loves to show up and support their Cougars. Are you expecting this to be a madhouse at Nippert on Saturday night?
I definitely think it will be. Arizona found a very interesting, I would say, crack in the armor that is the home field advantage of Nippert Stadium. And that is, if you can force an early turnover, you can shut everybody up, because it kind of felt like Nippert Stadium just had to recover from that point on. But honestly, this season, I think back to the Iowa State game, like the noise thing on my watch was going off like crazy all the time. It's going to be a loud environment. But yeah, we are kind of bracing ourselves for seeing a decent amount of blue in the stands as well.
Now, I'm sure you got your questions about BYU. I got one other one on from my vantage point. You talk about this fan base, and you mentioned earlier that the goal was, okay, maybe get to a bowl game this year. And I know that Scott Satterfield is one of those coaches that many people at Big 12 media days and the like were like, okay, he may be one of the first coaches out of a job. So give me a sense of just the fan base's satisfaction level with Satterfield, the job he's doing at Cincinnati, because they had some really high highs under Luke Fickell not that long ago. Are they hopeful that they can replicate that, albeit now in the Big 12 where that door is far more open than it was when they were in the American?
I think that the majority would agree that this has been a good year for him because the expectations that were set forth were not necessarily lofty. And albeit they've lost these last couple of games and they're still alive, quote unquote, in the Big 12 championship game run, but there's got to be a lot happen in front of them for them to get to Dallas. But I still think that whether or not they make it, everybody's pretty satisfied with where Scott Satterfield is right now. Now, when you're leaving the ballpark or when you're leaving the stadium and things like that, especially after this Arizona game, I still heard plenty of grumblings like, I knew that this coach was a fraud. It's like, quite honestly, you can't blame it on the coach, man. At some point, the players got to execute. And I really feel like he has done a good enough job, certainly for next year. But we're talking about like if they can take the step next year as well, like just keep on going in this upward trajectory, he's going to go from dude on the hot seat to dude on the short list for other teams to be looking at as well.
Okay, so you talk about the Big 12 race here, and Cincinnati is in a bit of a logjam. Them, Utah, Houston, ASU, all with 2 conference losses. BYU is 1 game in front with the 1 conference loss that they have, and so long as BYU wins out, they will go to Arlington and, in theory, have a rematch against Texas Tech. Do you feel like the chance, I don't want to call it spoiler, but essentially for Cincinnati to kind of reach up and drag BYU right into the fray with them as a 2-loss team, is that going to be enough motivation from your vantage point?
I think it's part of it. There's also another part of it too, is that after these last 2 losses, it does kind of feel as though people have written them off and they're like, oh, all right, well, UC, that was fun while it lasted. See you guys next year. And so they can put that chip back on their shoulder where for a minute, everybody was like, whoa, who is this really plucky upstart team from Cincinnati? Like, what's going on here? And so I think that for a moment, they got a little bit tight and they felt like they couldn't lose. Now they're back to that team that is the hunter and they can play the spoiler role a little bit, but also with some things to gain should they get that victory. So I definitely think that it's going to be part of the motivation, but that's one of the things that I was so surprised about in these last 2 losses, Jake, is the fact that early on in the season, players and coaches were all saying the same thing. We're fighting for Dallas. Dallas is the goal. It's not a bowl game. It's not 6 wins. It's not 7 wins. Dallas is the goal. And, you know, back then it was kind of like, oh, that's cute. That's great. They've got great goals. And then they won 7 in a row. We're like, are they on to something? And now they've lost 2 in a row. And it's like, okay, now we're like back to that whole thing of who is this team. So I think that they've got a lot on their shoulders as far as like just, you know, things to prove. And so I think that they're going to come in with a chip on their shoulder to face BYU because, I mean, they know, and I'm looking at this, and I don't know if this is how you are perceiving this as well from the BYU angle. Like BYU wins out, BYU beats Texas Tech. Big 12 should be a 2-bid league. If BYU gets the auto bid, and then if Texas Tech is the at-large, I think that works out. But it still feels like BYU's got to win out to do that. I don't know that they can make it in as a at-large.
Yeah, I think the playoff committee has made that painfully clear, I think, for Cougar fans. Sitting at 11, yes, you're inside the top 12, but you have the ACC champ, in theory, behind you right now. The G6 champion obviously will do that, so that takes the 11 and 12 spots, which casts BYU on the outside looking in right now. And BYU's only path, it feels like, Jeff, it win out, get to Arlington, and if you do lose, it's got to be a whole lot closer than it was just a couple of weeks ago there in Lubbock. And we'll see how that plays out. But BYU, and I'll just riff on this for a minute, and then we can get more other topics, is that the BYU mindset right now is we're focused on the here and now, and that's Cincinnati. Kalani Sitake got a little snippy with the media earlier this weekend. I completely understand why, about style points. And he said, my whole thing is we got to win the game first. If we're afforded the opportunity to maybe run it up, sure, we may consider that in that circumstance, but really the only game BYU in Big 12 play to date has had a chance to really run it up on is last week against TCU. They made that as thorough a beating as you possibly could make it. So I get the mindset. They're like, hey, we've had a lot of comeback wins. We've had to kind of grind out to where we're at. And their whole mentality is, hey, we know what happened last season. They allowed back-to-back losses to Kansas and ASU, ultimately do them in from playing in the Big 12 title game and having that shot at the CFP. They know how thin that margin is, and they refuse to essentially concede an inch right now because they know how razor close they were a season ago, and they want to keep everything within their control if at all possible.
I kind of feel like, and we discussed this a little bit on the Big 12 squad show that'll come out later on this week, but also I just feel this in my bones when I watch how the college football playoff committee really rates everything. It feels like good wins in the Big 12 are regular wins in the SEC and the Big 10, and there is no such thing as a good loss in the Big 12. And that's the annoying part about this, is that this conference is very close. There's there's Texas Tech in the top tier, BYU's right beneath them, Utah, Cincinnati, Arizona State, Houston. We're all kind of like tangled up in this group down here. There's a lot going on that it feels like, like you could have beat TCU by 70. And the college football committee is still going to look at this and be like, yeah, but look at the TCU's record. Like, they're not as good as we thought they were. Meanwhile, had this been, you flip the three letters instead of B12, it's SEC, they'd be like, oh, well, see, they got a good win against a really good opponent. Like, it just feels like different sets of rules. And that's the annoying part about this, where unless you're Texas Tech and you have shown the committee and you have a brand from years past that you can be that elite school, you got to be the Big 12 champion to make it into the thing. And that's the tough thing for me, because I do look at BYU and I'm very impressed with a lot of stuff that BYU has done this season. My only remaining question is this: can Bear Bachmeier keep this up? Because I know he was not supposed to be that guy, and he has been that guy to this point, but dude he's a pup, man. He's a pup.
Yeah, he's a young buck. You're right. And the thing about it is, I think all of us have been kind of waiting for that other shoe to drop in some ways around this kid, because true freshmen aren't supposed to do what he has done. And yes, he had a tough day against Texas Tech, but BYU across the board had a tough day against Texas Tech. And I think you chalk that up more to just a whole team failure in that game. And they want nothing more than to get another crack at Texas Tech, because they know that was not what they expected to put on the field there in Lubbock. But to your point, Bear has been nothing short of remarkable. He has been everything I think BYU could have hoped for and then some, considering the circumstances he came into. He came to BYU with the Jake Retzloff situation still pending. They had told Jake, hey, you can sit out 7 games as a suspension. And he decided, no, you know what? I'm withdrawing from school. I'm out of here. And that essentially forced their hand. They turned almost immediately to Bear and said, hey, get up to speed here, young man. And so long as you don't screw it up in training camp, you're our guy. We're going to build around you. And the fact that he's led them to a 9-1 record, a number 11 ranking in the entire country. The remarkable part is we don't talk about it almost as much as we should, considering the circumstances he came into and what he's accomplished.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the pressure that has been on him, and the fact that you talk about a dude that just got done passing his state board exams to get out of high school. And now here he is just going around the country just beating people up. And I think that there's a really good shot here for this kid to build himself a heck of a career just based on everything that he has done to this point. And I think that we'll only continue to see him improve. Yeah. I don't think that there's any chance that he is plateauing at all. I think that this is just the beginning for him. But I do wonder, I mean, Texas Tech was a bit of a wart there, and can he continue to just show that was an anomaly and there's not going to be another anomaly along the way? That's going to be the interesting part for me, because I don't think it's Cincinnati that's going to expose him. There's been some nice plays here and there from the Cincinnati defense, but they certainly are not the unit that is going to pose the kind of challenge to Bear Bachmeier that he hasn't seen before this year.
And we'll see how it all goes. The kid, I'll just say this. His nature is, I use the term unflappable all the time, but it's exactly what it is. He is like just steady all the time. And it's incredible. You're right, because young players are prone to the very highs and lows and kind of going up and down as they go. But his nature is he is very deferential in terms of he'll score like a big touchdown, kind of hand the ball off to the referee or hand it to one of his teammates to celebrate, and just kind of trot back over to the sideline. It's like, dude, you can show some emotion here. Like, I think that's just who he is as a player. He loves the game. You can tell he's passionate about it, but he doesn't allow himself to kind of ride the wave of emotion. He just likes playing football, and he knows that he has to kind of be that steady force to keep BYU doing what they're doing. So it's fun to watch. All right, so
that's a good way to be.
It is, and I think all of us can learn something from that just in everyday life. That's another facet of that. Now, looking at this game through the prism of what it means for BYU versus what it means for Cincinnati, I think we've dug into a lot of that, but there are keys to the game. What do we expect to play out on Saturday night? And we'll delve into those momentarily as we continue on with this crossover edition of Locked On Bearcats and Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at GameTime. College football is back. Well, it's been back for a while, but we couldn't all be more excited. The tailgates, the rivalries, the energy in the stand, there's nothing like it. But let's be real. Actually getting tickets can be the biggest battle in and of itself. Endless queues, hidden fees, prices jumping at checkout, and a whole litany of other issues. That's why I want you guys to do what I do and use GameTime, the app that gives the advantage back to the fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. My favorite feature of all of them with GameTime, what you see is what you pay. That price you see in the app, you're not going to have any fees or any other things added on when you try and check out about it. The app makes it super simple. You can see exactly what your seat view is from your seat before you buy the tickets. And the best part is faster, cheaper, and less stressful than any other way that I have bought tickets in the past. So I want you guys to take the guesswork out of buying your tickets and do it with GameTime. Download the GameTime app today. Create an account and redeem the promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's the promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. That's LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download GameTime today. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars and Locked On Bearcats your first listen of the day, or first view. I guess you're watching this on YouTube. If you have not done so already, please subscribe, rate, and review, and share it with everybody that you know that might be a Cincinnati or a BYU fan. All right, so Jake Hatch here, Jeff Carr there. Now, Jeff, this is a big game because we got Big Noon Kickoff showing up for this. This is the third time BYU has had one of these national shows this season. They had BNK earlier this season, as well as College Game Day. How excited are Cincinnati fans to have the Fox crew in town?
Super excited. I mean, College Game Day was here in 2021 whenever the Bearcats were undefeated and on their way to just a fantastic best season in program history type deal. And that was a lot of fun. But just to get the recognition that they've had, again, it's a little bit of, and it's easy for us fans to say this, definitely don't want the players to think this way, but like for us fans, it's kind of been a whole year of like, man, it's great to be here. It's great to be back, where it's like the program matters. They're playing good football and they're in every ball game. And, you know, outside of playing at 10 p.m. Eastern time in, you know, Salt Lake City, that was a tough one. But yeah, when it comes to this Big Noon Kickoff, this is going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be interesting because it's got the same kind of lead time where College Game Day was in Salt Lake City. Now, Big Noon Kickoff here in Cincinnati, and then they're not kicking off until 8 p.m. Eastern time, albeit Nip at night, man. Nip at night, it's a bit of a different animal. Like, I always compare it. There's a amusement park here for folks that do not know the area of Cincinnati very well called Kings Island. And they have a roller coaster, a wooden roller coaster that's been around since the 70s called the Beast. It's one of the most iconic roller coasters in all of the country. And it is an interesting thing that if you go ride it during the day, you're like, boy, that beat the crud out of me. And now I need a painkiller. But if you go there at night and there's some kind of event and you get to ride the Beast at night, it is the best roller coaster I've ever ridden. Some reason it goes faster. Some reason it rides smoother. There's something completely different about it. It's a completely different experience. Nippert Stadium is a wonderful atmosphere for a day football game. But man, at night, this thing just turns up something different. Like I was looking at our friends over at GameTime, the cheapest ticket right now, if you're looking for a pair of tickets, is $86. And we're talking about some end zone seats for that. There's some other seats on the visiting sideline that are about $87 to $90, but pretty much everything else is above $100. Like everybody's turned up for this. It's a sellout game. It's going to be a ton of fun, a long day of just good football action, because everybody knows the stakes here. This is senior day, and this is the season. If the Bearcats lose, then we're just going to see how much fun they can have when they go to Arlington or when they go to Fort Worth or wherever the
TCU.
area in Dallas that TCU is in. Fort Worth, yes, one of those other towns. There in Texas. Texas, it's a state. But this is an important day because the season hangs in the balance right here.
Okay. Now, the thing about this is, in talking with BYU players and coaches, they're actually kind of excited to play a night game on the Eastern time zone, because BYU plays a lot of their games. You already mentioned it when Cincinnati went to Utah. They played the 10 p.m. Eastern game. Well, BYU, their whole identity for the past decade and a half essentially has been built on what they're calling the Vampire Cougs moniker, where BYU under the lights at LaVell Edwards Stadium in particular, they're they're just absolutely unbeatable in so many different ways. And it sounds like the Cougars, they're like, sweet, we get a chance to do this at a different stadium, just essentially 2 hours time difference, but it's still an 8 o'clock game. So I think that both of these teams are up for the atmosphere under the lights, and I'm looking forward to this. It should lend itself to, I think, an electric atmosphere. And obviously, you mentioned the stakes on this game. BYU's chasing a Big 12 title game. CFP, Cincinnati is hoping to kind of drag them right back into the fray and make it a mess where they could emerge, I guess, on the other side as a Big 12 title game appearance. So there is a lot riding on this.
FanDuel's got BYU favored by 2.5 points on this one, and generally you can give the home team about 3 points, so they kind of figure that BYU's almost a touchdown favorite on a neutral site against the Bearcats, and then the over-under's at 54.5, and I think that that's still a little bit tenuous because they know that this Bearcats team can score, but they know that they've been susceptible here recently, and the other part, and I think it goes without saying with a lot of football games, but the turnover battle. Like, how that plays out is just such a huge thing because Utah won it and the Bearcats just could not come back from it. Arizona won it and the Bearcats had a chance to come back from it, but it always felt like they were reaching for something that was just a little bit too far for their grasp to get to. So how do they respond in this game? I don't have a good feeling about it, to be really honest with you. I feel like this has been the point last year for Brendan Sorsby where things are spiraling a bit for him, where he had some nice moments. There was a great leadership moment that he had in the Arizona game where he waved off subs and he said, we're going no huddle on a goal-to-go situation on the 2-yard line, and they ran it in for a touchdown. And it felt like a moment where it's like, okay, maybe he's getting them back in this. But then the defense came on the field, and that's what happens when the defense comes on the field. So ultimately, how does he play in this one? Does his receivers drop the ball like they did last week? Is he going to be able to make the throws when he needs to? That's really where it comes down to for me, because Brendan Sorsby last year when he hit this point just kept on sliding. Can he stop the slide and get to win? I got to see it to believe it, though. It's hard for me to predict it.
Real quick, I know we're running out of time here. How is he physically? Because he got beat up in that Utah game, and he was limping pretty good in that Arizona game.
He was, and all reports are good that he is ready to go. I don't believe that he will be he might be on the injury report as like probable or something like that, but I don't even really know if they do that anymore. But in case they do, that might be where he ends up. I expect him to be ready to go to at least start this game, and hopefully the offensive line keeps him clean enough that he's not getting hit a whole bunch like he has been these last few weeks. Because you're right, it could be a short night for him.
Yeah, and if you're doing the math on this, you mentioned the over-under of 54.5, kind of lends itself to a 27-24 ball game, give or take a point or two on either side. And that's kind of where I've been kind of straddling where I think this plays out. Last week's score was 30-24 in favor of Arizona, and that's essentially the score I've got for BYU beating Cincinnati in this game, because I do think the Bearcats are very capable of scoring. I don't expect BYU to shut them down. If they do, great. That's all. That obviously bolster BYU's case, Jeff. But it really feels like you're right. The turnover margin is huge. Now, I will give one stat real quick for Cincinnati Bearcat fans. In Kalani Sitake's tenure, when BYU scores first in a game, no matter if it's field goal, touchdown, or anything else, they are 51-9 in those 60 games that they have scored first in. So, quick start for BYU seems to essentially be a big reason as to how and why they will win football games, and that'll be critical, obviously, on the road.
Let me ask you what the flip side is of that one, because Arizona became the first team this year to score in the first quarter against the Bearcats in Nippert Stadium.
Well, so there we go. That lends itself right there to a big key to this game. Can BYU get off to that start? And if they can do that, it very well may lead them to where they want to go, and that's BYU continuing to control its fate when it comes to the Big 12 title game. But Cincinnati, their whole thing is, hey, we drag BYU down to the 2-loss level with us, and we may find ourselves maybe emerging in the final weekend going to the Big 12 title game. So whole lot riding on this game, Jeff. I'm very much looking forward to it.
It's going to be a fun college football Saturday at Nippert Stadium. I really think so. 30-24 sounds about right. I just don't think there's a world where the Bearcats cover 2.5. I feel like they either lose by a field goal or they win by a field goal. I don't think that this gets much further than that. Because I also love their place kicker, Steven Rusnak, and he hasn't had a moment yet where he gets to be the guy. Yeah. This could be that game where he gets to be the guy, but I think that I would say they end up losing 30-27. I'll take the over, but I think that the Cougars are going to cover the number.
All right, we'll see what happens. Jeff, where can Cougar fans find your work if they want more on Cincinnati in the lead up to this game?
You can find me on Twitter at Jeff Carr with 3 Fs, and you can also find the show at LO_Bearcats, and we're everywhere you get your podcasts, just like Locked On Cougars.
Yep. Yeah. Locked On Cougars on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. If you want more on the show, social media wise, as Jeff said, they're both available on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want my thoughts on all things sports, BYU and otherwise, check me out, Jacob C. Hatch on social media, X, etc. Jeff, as always, it's a pleasure, my man. It's good to have you on the college channel, by the way. I'll just say that it's good. We've heard you obviously with MLB for quite a while, but thanks for doing this.
Yeah, absolutely, Jake. Good to be with you and great to cross over with you too.
We'll see how it all plays out on Saturday night. But as always, thank you for all of your support of these two podcasts. Please subscribe, rate, and review, and continue to help us build both of these audiences. And come back tomorrow and be an everydayer right here on Locked On Cougars and Locked On Bearcats.